What follows is a reconstructed fictional account, associated with reports attributed to an incident in the Scottish Highlands near Loch Morven in October 1956. Most of the people involved never spoke about it again. Lydia Fraser made 3 mistakes the night she drove along the Loch Road. The first was slowing down to look. The second was asking Mrs. McRae about the wedding party. The third was touching the ribbon on the fence, the one that shouldn't have survived 50 years of Highland weather. It was October 1956, and Lydia had come to the Highlands to forget. 3 months since the miscarriage. 2 months since Robert's funeral. Complications from old war wounds, the doctor said, though Lydia knew it was more complicated than that. She'd come north with Graham, Robert's brother, because Edinburgh felt too full of empty nurseries and unopened wedding gifts. Tommy, a friend from Graham's service days, had joined them for the drive, cheerful and oblivious in the way only the young can be. The fog came down over Loch Morven just after dusk. Thick. Too thick. Lydia noticed it first. How the headlamps didn't penetrate so much as stop at the fog's surface. The light absorbed rather than reflected. The Austin's engine sounded muffled, like they were driving underwater. No wind, no bird calls, just the tires on wet tarmac and Graham's breathing, slightly labored as he leaned forward to see. Then the smell hit. Peat smoke, yeah, but underneath it something else. Wet silk, old flowers, the particular sweetness of things preserved too long. Lydia's chest tightened. She'd smelled something similar in the hospital, in those terrible hours after. That's when Graham slowed down and whispered something she didn't catch because she was staring at the lights ahead. A procession of lanterns moving through the fog, figures walking single file along the verge, their glow soft and wrong, like looking at a candle through water. At the front, a man with a pipe held to his shoulder. Behind him, women in pale dresses, men in dark suits, and at the center, barely visible through the mist, a woman in white. The piper's tune drifted back to them. It caught, skipped, like a record with a scratch in it, the melody repeating the same 3 notes before lurching forward again. Graham stopped the car. None of them moved. Lydia counted the figures. 9, maybe 10. But when she tried to count again, the numbers seemed different. The lanterns flickered without wind. In their glow, she saw the bride's profile, young, unlined. But the face had a flatness to it, like a photograph of a face rather than a face itself. Tommy made a sound in the back seat, said something about Highland weddings, old customs, but his voice had gone thin. He pressed back against the seat like he wanted to melt into it. They followed for maybe a quarter mile. The procession never acknowledged them, never turned, just walked with that same measured step, boots making no sound on the wet road. The piper's tune echoed from the wrong direction, sometimes ahead, sometimes from the loch itself, as if the water were playing it back. Then a bank of fog rolled across and the lights winked out. Not faded, extinguished, like someone had blown them out all at once. Graham pulled over, cut the engine. They sat in silence, listening to the wind return, because suddenly there was wind again, rattling the windows, bringing the smell of cold water and heather. Lydia looked back at the road. No footprints in the rain, no tracks, nothing. Her hands were shaking. The mooring inn sat hunched at the junction, its windows lit but unwelcoming. Inside, the peat fire burned low and Mrs. McRae moved behind the bar, with the careful efficiency of someone who'd learned not to waste motion. She was maybe 60, iron gray hair pulled tight, and when she set the tea tray down, the cups rattled slightly against the saucers. Lydia waited until the woman turned to leave before asking about the procession, kept her voice light, just curious about the wedding they'd seen on the Loch Road. Mrs. McCrae's hand stopped on the doorframe. The teacup rattled harder, a soft, insistent sound like teeth chattering. "No wedding," she said. "Not tonight." Then she suggested they keep away from the Kirk Road after dark, said the fog made it treacherous, and there was the matter of the causeway that had collapsed years back. She didn't look at Lydia when she said it. When Lydia pressed, mentioned the bride, the lanterns, the piper, Mrs. McCrae's knuckles went white on the doorframe. "Some folks still walk that road," she said, "from habit, old families keeping old ways." Her voice had gone flat. Then she left, and Lydia heard her in the kitchen, speaking low and urgent to someone else. That night, Lydia stood at the window watching the fog press against the glass. It moved, actually moved, like something breathing against the pane, leaving condensation that shouldn't form from the outside. She saw them again just after midnight. The lights appeared at the far end of the road, the same procession, the same slow walk, but this time Lydia could hear it, faint, like it was traveling through water. The piper's tune, 3 notes catching, repeating, then lurching forward. Wrong, all wrong. She opened the window an inch. Cold air poured in, and with it that smell again. Wet silk, preserved flowers, something underneath it now, something mineral and dark that made her stomach turn. The procession moved beneath a street lamp, and the light fell directly on them. The bride turned her head toward the kirk on the hill. For just a moment her profile was clear. Beautiful, yes, but empty. Like a mannequin's face, like something playing at being human. Then they walked on into the fog and vanished, and Lydia realized she'd been holding her breath so long her chest ached. She stood there shivering. Behind her in the room she heard 3 soft knocks. She turned. Nothing, just the dark room and Graham sleeping. But when she looked back at the window, there was a handprint on the glass. Small, feminine, on the outside. The fog had left it. In the morning, she walked the Kirk Road, camera in hand, before Graham woke. The fog had lifted, but the smell lingered, peat and something floral gone sour. She passed the church and kept going, following the track until it ended abruptly at a collapsed section of earth. Below, a peat bog stretched black and still. No reeds moved, no insects, just that terrible stillness. She climbed down carefully. Her shoes sank into soft ground, and when she pulled them free, they made a sucking sound that raised the hair on her neck. The wheel rim was there, half buried, rusted iron that might have been from a carriage. Older than the 1940s, much older. Near it, caught on a spoke, was the ribbon. Red silk thread, faded but intact. When she pulled it free, it was warm. She dropped it, picked it up again, still warm. Back at the inn, old Angus Kerr sat in the corner nursing whiskey. 80 years old, face like driftwood, eyes that had seen too much. Lydia sat down across from him and laid the ribbon on the table. He stared at it for a long moment. His hand shook as he lifted his glass. "Wedding party," he said, "after the war. Local girl marrying a man from Inverness." They held the ceremony at St. Brinac and walked down to the manor for the reception. 20 people, piper leading, bride and groom in the center. Lanterns because the days were short. The causeway looked solid. No one checked. The ground underneath had washed away. When they walked across, the center gave way. 7 went down. The bride, the groom, 3 bridesmaids, the piper, a groomsman, 12 feet into the bog. The peat was soft and deep. He paused, drank, continued. The bog kept 2 of them, just wouldn't let go. They tried for days, ropes, poles, everything. But the water was black and the reeds kept shivering even when there was no wind, like the lanterns were still burning underneath. Lydia's hands had gone cold. They buried the others quick, Angus said. Families wanted it quiet. Shame of it. Post-war, everything was scarce. There was fighting about the land, about responsibility. Estate said it was the village. Village said otherwise. The road was left to rot. He looked at Lydia then, really looked. People see them still, he said, walking the Kirk Road, trying to get to the reception they never reached. But those who see them carry something away. A weight, a coldness that gets into your chest, makes sleep hard. Lights fail, small things stop working, clocks stop at 3 in the morning, radios play static. You've seen them, haven't you? Lydia nodded. Then it's chosen you as witness, he said. Don't go back to that road. But she did. That afternoon, she found Reverend Callum Ross at the kirk. He was young for a minister, with tired eyes and ink-stained fingers. When she mentioned the 1949 wedding, he went very still. Then he led her into the vestry and unlocked a cabinet. The ledger was old, water-stained. He turned to a page near the back. Funeral rites for the wedding party of Catherine Drummond and Ian MacLeod, 14th October 1949. Incomplete recovery. Rites performed as able. Below it, road closed by order of the estate. Repairs disputed. Causeway abandoned. There was a map showing the kirk, the causeway, 7 small crosses marking where they fell. The Reverend said the church had wanted to do more, a proper memorial. But families were divided, the estate was broke, and, well, everything got tangled in pride and grief until nothing happened. The dead were buried quietly. The road was left. The village learned not to talk about it. He looked at her, said he'd seen them too years back, said they weren't ghosts the way stories told it. They just walked, over and over, trying to complete what was interrupted. The ceremony finished at the kirk, but they never reached the reception, never crossed into the celebration that sealed it. So they kept walking. What would stop them? Lydia asked. He didn't know. Maybe proper rites, maybe acknowledgement, maybe nothing. That night, Lydia convinced Graham and Tommy to drive the Loch Road one more time. Graham was against it. He'd heard enough, but Lydia felt compelled, a pull she couldn't name, like something calling her back. They drove out just after midnight. The fog was waiting, thick as wool, pressing against the windscreen. Graham kept the headlamps low and drove slowly. The engine sounded wrong, too loud then too quiet, the rhythm irregular. At exactly 3 o'clock, Lydia checked her watch. The lights appeared, closer this time. Not ahead, but beside them, walking parallel through the heather. The piper led, and now Lydia could hear the tune clearly. Wedding march played too slowly, notes dragging, catching, skipping that same phrase over and over. Graham slowed. The procession kept pace. 10 figures moving through fog that seemed thicker around them, like they brought it with them. The bride turned her head. Up close, Lydia saw the details. Dark hair pinned with flowers, eyes that caught the lantern light and held it, flat and reflective like a cat's. The face was beautiful, wrong. A photograph animated, something playing at being human. One of the bridesmaids broke from the line. She walked toward the car, lantern swinging, and Lydia's breath stopped. Graham hit the brakes. The woman came right up to Lydia's window and raised one hand. She pressed it against the glass. For one heartbeat, the hand was solid. Lace glove, silver ring, nails painted pale pink. Warm, actually warm. Heat bleeding through the glass into Lydia's cheek. Then the warmth turned cold. The hand went translucent. Fingers became suggestions of flesh. The glove dissolved into mist. The bridesmaid's mouth moved. We must cross, not reach the kirk. Then she stepped back and rejoined the line. Inside the car, the temperature dropped. Lydia could see her breath. Tommy was gasping in the back seat, and the radio, which hadn't been on, crackled to life. The piper's tune poured through the speakers, distorted, heavy with static, but underneath it, other sounds. Water, reeds rustling, someone breathing wetly like lungs full of bog water trying to expel it. Graham grabbed the dial, but it wouldn't turn. The tune played on, grinding, metallic, that same phrase catching and repeating. Lydia looked back at the procession. They were walking toward the collapsed causeway, lanterns bobbing, and the fog was thickening inside the car now. Actually inside, wisps of it curling around the seats, smelling of peat and wet silk and that dark mineral thing underneath. Tommy screamed, said there was a handprint on his window, not on the outside, on the inside, small, feminine, condensation forming in the shape of fingers he could see through. Graham tried the ignition. It ground uselessly. Tried again. Nothing. Outside, the bride's reflection appeared in the rear-view mirror, behind Lydia, even though she was walking away through the fog. The reflection smiled. Graham tried again and the engine roared. He reversed hard, tires spinning, then swung around and drove back toward the village. The radio cut out mid-note. The fog inside the car dissipated. The temperature climbed. But in the rear window, Lydia watched the lights moving away toward the causeway, and the last thing she saw was the bride's gown fading like smoke, and behind her the piper still playing that broken tune. The next morning, Lydia went to the village council, showed them the ribbon, the photos, the ledger, argued about safety and history until someone listened. 2 weeks later, a crew surveyed the site. They found the wheel rim, pieces of personal effects buried in the peat, a shoe buckle, a brooch, the piper's chanter, wood preserved and black. When they pulled it from the bog, one of the workers said the reeds nearby shivered though there was no wind. The local paper ran a story. Families were contacted. The kirk held a memorial service in November, proper rites this time, and a cairn was placed at the site. That night the fog came down again. Mrs. McRae called Lydia 3 days later, said the lights had appeared one last time. The procession had walked to the kirk, reached the doors, and the piper had played a final phrase. Clear, no catching, no skipping. Then they'd walked on past the church, up the hill, and faded. No one had seen them since. But Lydia carried something away. For weeks she'd wake at 3 a.m., exactly, chest tight, gasping like she'd been underwater. Lights in her Edinburgh flat flickered when she walked past. Her alarm clock stopped every night at 3 and wouldn't restart. And the ribbon, she'd kept it in her desk drawer, wrapped in tissue, disappeared one morning. Just gone. The tissue remained carefully folded, but the ribbon had vanished. She dreamed sometimes of walking behind a woman in white, fog pressing close, unable to call out or stop or turn around. Just walking, following. The dream always ended at the edge of a collapsed road, and when she looked down, she saw dark water, and in the water her own face looking back, pale and empty and wrong. Graham heard the piper too, though he never said it out loud. And Tommy moved to Glasgow and wrote once to say he couldn't listen to pipe music anymore. Said it made his chest hurt, made him feel like he was drowning on dry land. The last time Lydia drove past Loch Morven was 2 years later. She stopped at the mooring inn. Mrs. McRae said the road was quiet now, no more processions. But on certain fog-heavy nights, when the wind came down from the loch just right, you could still hear the piper. Just one figure walking alone, playing that same tune over and over like he'd forgotten how it ended. Lydia asked if anyone had gone to look. Mrs. McRae shook her head. Said some things finish in their own time. Said the piper would walk until the tune was done. Maybe it never would be. Lydia left before dark, didn't stop on the loch road. But as she passed the kirk and the cairn, she rolled down her window and listened. The wind moved through the heather, and underneath it, faint as breath, came the sound of a pipe. 3 notes, catching, repeating. She drove faster. But that night in Edinburgh, fog pressed against her window. She woke at 3 a.m. to footsteps in the hallway. Soft, measured, the smell of wet silk and peat smoke drifting under her door. She lay still until morning. When she got up to check, there were no footprints. But on her desk, where the ribbon had been, was a small dried flower. The kind used in wedding bouquets. The kind that shouldn't exist anymore. She left it there. Some invitations, she'd learned, couldn't be declined. Some processions never ended. They just found new people to follow, new witnesses to carry the weight, new hands to press against glass in the dark, warm for just one heartbeat before the cold set in. And on the morning she finally disappeared, vanished from her locked flat with no signs of struggle, just gone. Her brother Graham found only 2 things: the dried flower on her desk and condensation on the window in the shape of a handprint, small, feminine. From the inside this time. Outside in the Edinburgh fog, someone heard a pipe playing. 3 notes catching, repeating, and then, just once, resolving into a wedding march. Complete, clear, perfect. Then silence. The procession had found its witness, and the bride walked on. That's all for tonight. You can turn your light off now, but before you do, listen closely to the quiet. The silence isn't empty. If something followed you here, if it's still standing just out of sight, don't turn away yet. And please, remember to lock your door before you try to sleep. We'll be waiting for you next week, same day at 3 a.m. Until then, try not to listen too closely.